Matthew Macfadyen stars in the third season of Succession on HBO. I'm David Buchanan with Gold Derby. Matthew, such a pleasure to be with you today. I wanted to start kind of big picture on the season because you have such an incredible arc, and of course, that phenomenal moment in the finale, which we'll get to. But I just wanted to start by asking, how much when you started production did you know about Tom's journey over the season? And if you did or didn't know what was going to happen, do you like to know in advance, or do you like to kind of go, episode by episode, moment by moment?
I don't know. It's quite nice to know a little bit. I didn't know anything about season 1 or 2. I don't think any of us did, but I certainly didn't. And that suited me just fine, because you just, you get the episodes and you go, oh, this is what happens. And then you don't know what's going to happen in the next one or the following. But Jesse rang me before we started season 3 and gave me a little sort of outline of where Tom might end up. So that was quite exciting. But I sort of forgot about it, because inevitably you're into shooting episode 1 and it's sort of all encompassing and involving, and also in the back of your mind you're thinking, well, they may change their minds, they may go somewhere, they may go another way, because things sort of change on the fly a little bit with how the episodes turn out and how the actors are playing the part. So I didn't feel precious about it. And I was quite keen to read episode 9, because I didn't know what sort of, I didn't know how intense it would be, or how, whether it would be a sort of subtle about turn or whether it was a real betrayal. And so, yeah.
Yeah, it's terrific. And I do have a few questions on that as we get there. But, one of the things this season, coming out of season 2 and that fantastic conversation that Tom and Shiv have on the beach, we kind of pick up right after that in the beginning of season 3. Their relationship is quite icy in the beginning, but what's so interesting to me always about the two of them, especially this season, is even when they're personally, not at their best, they're always kind of strategically able to work together until, of course, we know what happens. But I just wanted to ask, what do you think is it about these two characters that even when they're not in a good place romantically, they're still kind of on strategically? What makes them work like as a strategic pair?
I don't know, but you're right. They do that. That's the weird, they, even when they're on their, you find them on their honeymoon early on in season 2, and they're in Fiji or somewhere on a yacht, and they can't really relax because they want to know what's going on with Kendall and the company, and, and Tom often protests that actually he'd like to sort of jack it all in and go with Shiv and, be dive instructors or sheep farmers or something. But actually they're sort of operators, and they like the cut and thrust of the business and the, the corporation and the, that side of life. So yeah, and you're right. There isn't, when you start season 3, they really haven't had any time to, it picks up straight away from that awful episode on the yacht, on the island, when they're all on the yacht together, and they haven't really had time to sort of digest that or talk it through, and they're in crisis mode talking about what to do about Kendall's betrayal and all the rest of it. So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, it doesn't help that Tom is shipped off to Sarajevo for a while and is kind of isolated from most of the family,
wondering what she's doing and wondering what everyone else is doing. And
I did want to ask too, the season is also structured for you around the kind of looming threat of prison, which is something that Tom knows he can't really get out of, but also leans into because he thinks it gives him some kind of leverage or, advantage with Logan. And of course, we see not so great consequences to Tom's psyche because of that. But I wanted to know,
he's manfully kind of, accepted that punishment for, he's taking one for the company, but really can't deal with it.
And it's so striking because he doesn't, once he offers to Logan and Logan kind of takes him up on it, the whole prospects really change for him quite drastically. But what is it about, what do you think what is it about Logan's approval that Tom is willing to do something so drastic? Is it just Tom's, ambition? Is it familial oriented? What really drives Tom to say, this is worth it if I can, get some favor with Logan?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, it's mad. I mean, from the minute you see him, he's with his watch box, and the pilot, he's like desperate for, desperate. It's pathetic, but kind of sweet. He just wants something from, and the more sort of sycophantic and obsequious he is with Logan, the more Logan, until he says, I'll go to jail. I'll do it for you. It's fine. So he sort of worked out a way to, because if the worst does happen, then at least he'll be covered in glory, and he'll have sort of a stake in the company. So I don't know. That felt like quite a clever move, even if it's sort of nuts and self-flagellating.
Yeah, personally, it makes a mess of Tom for a long time, but he is this season in particular, we really see Tom thinking very strategically and making moves that actually make a lot of sense for him. Mm-hmm. One moment with Logan that I want to ask you about, it's a very small moment, but one of my favorites of the season for you and for Brian Cox is in the shareholder meeting episode. Tom is kind of helping him to and from the bathroom throughout the episode. And Logan is actually suffering a lot and is in a lot of pain.
He has a UTI. Yeah.
Yeah. And Tom actually, there's a real moment of like genuine concern and care in that stall, which is kind of, it starts funny, but it also, becomes a bit serious.
Yeah.
And it's just a nice, like, I feel like those kind of small moments are very revealing. Yeah. So can you talk about working with Brian, like just in that moment, but in general, like to find those moments of genuine connection between the two of them?
Well, you're right. There is a sort of, it's weird. And even though it is hilarious, when he says, do you need me to hold the scepter? Because he would, I think. And it's so funny. A lot of that, we were trying not to laugh, Brian and I, because he's out of it, so he's sort of moaning and groaning and trying to make sure, so, but there are moments of sort of demented tenderness there, when he says, I think Susan, one of the writers, Susan Stanton, came and gave me a note and said, call him Papa, when he says, he calls me son. I know he doesn't know if it's Wednesday or Christmas, but he calls me son. And I say, thanks, Pop. And she says, say Papa. And it was such a brilliant, because it's sort of Tom, Tom knows he's not really with it. And so it's a nice excuse to have a moment of, father-son time.
Yeah. That is something that this series does, better than any other, is the kind of high wire act of high stakes drama, like in this episode in particular, the shareholder, this high stakes drama and just wicked satire and
farce.
Farce.
I mean, it's like
satire.
that episode is like a sort of Moliere. It's like a Michael Frayn noises off.
Yes.
The cat in the bag, the imaginary cat. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to ask you, is especially in these huge ensemble episodes, what is it like to kind of navigate that tone when you have 12 or 20 actors in a room?
I think a lot of the actors in our show have done a lot of theater, and that helps because they're sort of 11, sometimes 11, 12 page scenes, and they all have a rhythm, and you have to sort of, you have to be paying attention to the other actors in the scene, like you would in a play. Otherwise you miss your cue. It's not all about the camera on you. And so it makes it very thrilling to play those sort of scenes, because it's a rare thing. Usually you're playing little moments, you're playing, I don't know, 3/8 of a page or 1/8 of a page or something, but to do those great long takes with 8 or 9 actors is great fun. It's great fun.
Yeah, I have to imagine. And it's such a contrast too, because you have those really hysterical scenes and episodes, but a lot of this season for Tom in particular is really very despairing. We see him go to some, very dark places. And I wanted to ask you about that, about your process of bringing the character there, number one, and number two, the kind of toll it takes on you when, I'm sure these are incredibly long shoot days and you have to kind of live in this, live in this kind of down place. What is it like for you as an actor to go there and then to try to shake it off too?
I don't. That's not how I work. I don't sort of shake it off or go anywhere. It's a mask going on and off. It's not. I'm quite strict about me, Matthew, and the character I'm playing. It's two different things. There's no sort of you use your imagination, and that's part of the technique of acting. You're doing what the character does, and you get lost in it, and then you come out, and then you're shooting the show, and you're on set, and so that's never an issue with me. Even when I'm doing very, very dark, if I've done things in the past which have been very sort of unsettling. But the honest answer is the scenes are so well written and so beautifully written. They sort of look after you. It's not. I don't have to sort of dredge up some thing. They sort of allow my imagination to go. And I'm working with wonderful actors like Jeremy and Brian and Sarah and all those guys. So it's not a big challenge. You sort of jump in and you're looked after very much, in that environment.
Yeah, I was going to ask you next, although maybe since it doesn't kind of weigh on you, maybe it's not the case, but there's that great scene when Tom learns that he probably is not going to go to prison. The DOJ is not so hot on the case anymore. And he goes to kind of celebrate with cousin Greg and flips the desk and kind of has this, release after such a long time. I was going to ask, how was that cathartic for you after so many episodes of kind of brooding to just, go crazy in that room?
When you get a scene that says, the stage direction was Tom walks in, Tom smashes Greg's office to bits. That's the end. So you're like, okay, it's great. I mean, but I would say all the scenes are sort of great therapy, because especially with my character, because he's so excruciating and so often, and says such ridiculous things and behaves so appallingly sometimes, that it's sort of great to play that stuff, because I can get all that terrible embarrassment out of my system, and be quite cool in real life and calm, nice. The plan anyway. Yeah.
One of the great scenes between you and Nicholas Braun this season, I mean, you're always, Tom and Greg throughout the years, such an interesting and evolving pair. One of the great scenes is your story to him of Nero and Sporos. I just have to ask you about that, because it comes back in a major way in the finale. But as the relationship between the two of you continues to evolve and get more and more complex, was that particular kind of story from history illuminating to you two about what is kind of the dynamic between these characters, because it's so specific and so bizarre and kind of encapsulates their dynamic at this point in time so well.
And I mean, I'd agree with all, and that's exactly, it's such a brilliantly written scene for those two. I mean, because there is a sort of curious mixture of real affection from Tom to Greg, and trust, and companionship and all the rest of it, but obviously not, because it's not an equal relationship, and Tom is his boss and is really mean to him and aggressive to him on lots of occasions, so there's an awful lot in there. So it's such a batty scene, it's such an odd thing, it was just joyful to play and to try and we don't, I think it's true of all of the scenes and all of the the way we work on the show, we don't rehearse very much, partly because the scenes are so good. You sort of just, they look after you. You rehearse, you do a sort of camera rehearsal, and then you get going on it, and it sort of reveals itself, and this Nero and Sporos scene, always in our heads, I think, was quite sort of weirdly tender and odd and a little bit scary, and then goes really ugly at the end.
All of the above. All of the above.
Yeah.
The final two episodes are set in Italy, and for our kind of heightened, all high stakes finale. And I have to ask you, I have to get into the shocking end of the season, which I think nobody was expecting. It's such a brilliant kind of twist to end the season. I wanted to ask you first, since Jesse kind of gave you maybe an outline of where things might go, did you pinpoint in the scripts a moment between Tom and Shiv where you said, okay, Tom has had it, right? Like, this is the moment that kind of changes everything for Tom. It might just be opportunity when she calls and says, this is what's going to happen. Tom might just see an opportunity for himself and grab it. But was there a moment where you think the relationship really kind of changed in kind of, there's no going back,
I don't know. I think if there, I'm not sure there was. I think if any, it's a sort of incremental buildup of layer upon layer of an accumulation of hurt and, being let down and being belittled and then I think if there is a moment of, I'm not even sure how considered it is with Tom, because we make decisions, as human beings, we make decisions all the time. They're not always planned. You just go, oh, okay, now this is what I must do. And maybe it's a bit of that with Tom. And I think maybe when he talks to her on the phone and they're on the way to see Logan, the three of them actually are on the way, the three siblings. Maybe that's the moment he thinks, right. And then sees Greg, and then it all happens. So it's not a big plan. He hasn't cooked it up. It's just a sort of, this is clear now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Take us inside that, just shooting that final scene, because Tom isn't in it a lot, but these small gestures, the pat on the back from Logan, the comforting of Shiv, even though, we're the audience is intuiting, what has happened. There's a lot said in just your gestures, not in the dialogue, but.
Well, the great thing is that it goes back to my point about the writing, because actually they're very innocuous. Logan just comes out and we say, hi, and he pats me on the back and says, thanks. And it's just, there's no heavy stuff. There's no great feeling or emotion. But it's enormous in the context of the story and the narrative and the drama. And so as actors, you don't have to do very much. You're just telling the story clearly and simply, and and trusting in the director to dial you up or down or whatever. But actually, all it was a look from Logan, a little pat on the back and a little wink, and that's enough. And then you see this look on Sarah's face, which is sort of terrifying. She looks scary. She's so full of rage and anguish and disbelief, it's great.
Yeah, it is such a brilliant place to end the season, and fans waited so long because of the pandemic to see the third season. I know that like the writing is just about done for season 4. Before I let you go, I just have to ask, is there anything, have they teased you anything on where the next season is going that you can impart?
Now it's this, because I know they must be nearly done, and it's just it's infuriating because I'm trying to be very sort of disciplined and not email any of the writers and say, hi, what's happening? How are you? So I have no idea. Maybe some of the other actors do. I don't think so. Maybe Brian's press ganged Jesse into telling him everything. I don't know.
We are very eager to see what happens next. Matthew Macfadyen, congratulations on the 3rd season of Succession, and thanks so much for talking to Gold Derby.
Thank you. Take care.